Thank you, everybody. And indeed, it's really nice to see all of you after 3 years almost of not being able to see each other during this project, although we worked very hard. And I'm feeling quite proud of the success of this project. I'll just go briefly so we just remember what we did all these years, and then we can go back. So the project, you recall, and for those of you that are all here, it was all about this Article 7 of the EED, and we actually tried to help member states on how to implement the policies. The 3 axes of work was to facilitate and expand the knowledge sharing, and I think that has been accomplished to a great extent. So how we help member states exchange specific knowledge on specific items of the EED of the Article 7 and guide them towards better policies. Then we provided tools and various resources for implementation of the various aspects, the difficult ones, I would say. And then we, to a great extent, we have improved the MRV system, so it helped at least member states understand what they need to do to improve their MRV systems and ensure that they would go for the better redesigning of the policies. These are all our partners. It's a diverse picture from various countries. We have agencies on board, universities, research bodies, and that's what you see. The aim, of course, was to capture all the EU 27. When we started, it was 28. It came as a product of 2 projects of ENSMOV, which I think my colleagues will discuss later on, and multi-E. So it was actually bridging an old project on the Article 7 and the multi-E, which was a project on MRV, and that's where we aimed at. In order not to work on a top-down level, in every year we were asking our colleagues and all the ministries and the agencies to provide us with where they needed support. Meaning that we try to identify on a yearly basis the topics, the hot topics, if we could call them, on where specific support would be needed for the Article 7. And here you can see the list of the first round and second round. It's quite diverse. Every year things were changing. And even now, I think things will be even different priorities, like side effects, how to link it with climate targets, additionality, materiality, and all these known aspects, which I think we'll hear in a bit also on what we found. This is a platform, which is the Article 7 ED, which of course it will be renamed gradually to Article 8 ED, as we'll hear. And why we consider it a success, next to all this abundance of materials, which we are going to see, we have identified that most member states that participated found it interesting and they got some support on specific aspects. I will not go country by country, but you can see that all somehow they gained something from this project, and we helped them in developing further their policies. The last country, I think, was Sweden, actually, that approached us for clear technical support on how to build up EEOs, and we helped them, I think, to quite an extent. The topics are diverse, and that's also interesting. So member states did not receive support on one side only. They got different aspects that they needed to resolve, and we hope, and at least that's what they have declared, that the topics we covered help them in resolving these specific issues they have. That's it. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the meeting. You know that there is a dense agenda. We got the nice panels, and the topics that will be discussed are key. And these are the ones, actually, the hot topics of the Article 8 now. And we will see what has happened also on the Article 7. So I give the floor directly to our officer who has supported us, and would like to thank her very much, Uli, Ulrike Nusseler from EXEASME, now SINEA. And really a great thank to you for all the support with years. I just click next one. Fine. It goes back. Sorry, I will hold it opposite. Good. Okay.
This one. Yeah. Okay. Super.
So hello, and thank you for this introduction as well, and thank you for having invited me. And you see me, I'm Ulrike Nusseler, and I'm a very proud project advisor of this very nice project. It's really one of my favorite ones. And well, just to start with something else, because you know ENSMOV much better than I do probably. I call this a couple of slides that I have turning policy into action, because I think this is at the heart of what we're doing. It's also at the heart of this project. Does it also work? So before I start to go into ENSMOV and all my pride, just to quickly, for the ones that don't know, make you familiar with the new environment. So we have been ENSMOV. Now there's a new agency since April 2021, the European Climate Infrastructure Environment Executive Agency, ENEA, but we also call it, the nickname is European Green Deal Agency because it bundles almost all programs that are particularly relevant for implementing the Green Deal. I won't read all these programs to you. The one that is now closest to my heart is now the LIFE program. So we have been in charge of, if I say we, it's our unit, well, most of our units are in charge of implementing the energy efficiency part of Horizon 2020, but we, so meaning the market uptake and policy implementation support actions, have moved under LIFE. LIFE Clean Energy Transition. So I don't know if you, well, if it was big enough, you would probably see familiar faces. I don't know if you can see them. But just to say that most of the ones that you were in touch with beforehand are still there. We're just now the LIFE Energy and LIFE Climate Unit. So 2 words on this new program. I mean, LIFE has 4 sub-programs, and LIFE Clean Energy Transition is one of the 4 sub-programs. And as you can see, it's dedicated to sustainable energy. And key objective, as I said, is it's following up the market uptake and policy implementation activities under Horizon 2020. So meaning that we try to create a market and regulatory environment for the clean energy transition. And there are 5 intervention areas. I read them quickly out to you. Building policy and regulatory framework, rolling out technology services and business models, attracting private finance, mobilizing local and regional investments, and engaging and empowering consumers. So these are the 5 big blocks under which our topics would usually work. Just some basic facts. We have around 1 billion euros funding available for the years 21 to 27. Most of it is implemented through, there might be other actions as well, coordination support actions that you will know already from Horizon 2020. We give 95% of co-funding rate, and very similar to what we have been doing, it's policy-driven, quite specific funding topics. Most of the topics have to be carried out by a minimum of 3 eligible countries. And now here's the micro gone. Is that me? Not on. No, not stuck. And just that you can be reassured, also the grant management system and then the application system is the same as the one that you knew under Horizon. Oh, that was wrong now? No. So I don't want to bore you too much, but just to focus on you know, just to spot on one of the, one of the actions that, of the topics, it seems that might be most relevant for you as you're working on ENSMOV and policy support. So one of the priority actions that we identified was implementing sustainable energy key legislation, because we found, or everybody found, DGNR found, that of course support is needed because the legislative framework is constantly evolving and dramatically evolving in these days, and it needs to match 27 and more national contexts. So member states need support to implement the legislation because very often they don't have the technical capacity and the resources to implement all the technical requirements that are out there in the legislation and that are also evolving a lot. So member states need to introduce policy measures that take into account their specific needs, their specific frameworks and conditions, and they also have to put in place adequate tools for monitoring and evaluation. And this is exactly where you come in. But as priority actions or possible actions, you see those things in blue that are there. Typical actions that we think need support are, for example, exactly what they are doing, enabling the exchange and insight across member states, provide technical support, scope and assess and model the impacts of the implementation measures. We need support for the monitoring and evaluation of policy implementation. We need new methodologies to more accurately measure, calculate, and monitor and account in under specific policy measures. so specifically, notably Article 7, but also collect and analyze data. So these are just a couple of fields where we thought that that support is really needed, and this is in the past, but even more in the future. So most of you might, who have been in the concerted action, know this slide. Actually, it's a slide that I used to explain to the new colleagues in CINEA what our projects are doing. So of course, it's other projects do other things, but this one I presented to show what ENSMOV is doing. This is the policymakers. Of course, policymakers usually look super good. This one looks a bit less good, but anyway, you see he's completely overwhelmed with all these technical terms. He doesn't have the capacity and the resources and the technical knowledge to really deal with this kind of things. And this is exactly, and this is also already my last slide, where you come in, where ENSMOV comes in. You provide the resources and the technical assistance and the help and the tool and the platforms to exchange with others that can help people in the ministries to put in place, to contextualize the requirements that they need to deal with. And I think you have had, not only with ENSMOV, also prior to that already ENSMOV, a huge success. And I know it from testimonies. I just talked to a colleague 2 years ago, who, when he was in the national ministry, said, without ENSMOV, we wouldn't have the EEOs, we wouldn't have the schemes in place. So ENSMOV really made a difference, and ENSMOV is making a difference. And I'm very much looking forward to even the follow-up, which is ENSMOV Plus in the future, because the Energy Efficiency Directive will be then in place. I mean, I think end of the year or beginning of next year, it should be adopted. So many new challenges, many more, let's say, also focuses like energy poverty that you're going to address. And as I said, I'm a very proud project advisor, and I'm confident that I will be proud again. And I'm very thankful that you provide this kind of help and support to the policy process. Thank you.
And then we move on with the main findings from ENSMOV by Sam from RAP. Can you just move the slide forward?
Okay, so results in 15. And I want to apologise actually before I get going, because if I haven't covered the results that some of you guys are most proud of, I'm very sorry. But perhaps this is one of the issues actually with having a project during the COVID era. So we've done a lot more online events and many fewer together events. Basically, we met at the beginning and we've met at the end. And in between, we've had lots and lots of online events, which obviously it makes the interaction different. So I think while under the ENSMOV project, there were probably, I mean, I actually wasn't involved in the ENSMOV project as one of the contracted parties, but I did interact with it, and I saw lots of great on the ground interactions. And of course, things happen in the margins of the meetings, and you get that real quality of interaction. But the great thing about ENSMOV, I think, is that everything we've done has been recorded, so it's all there for posterity on the internet. And if you want to know about additionality, or if you want to know how different countries are approaching it, if you want to know about how people are working out how to measure the impacts of taxation measures, or if you want to know about how people are designing auctions, you can go online and it's not just reading the workshop report, you can actually hear it from the horse's mouth. This is what people are doing in their countries. And I think that's actually a really valuable set of resources. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the project. I'm not going to dwell on that because Velastis has already covered it to a certain extent. Let me just go back and say, yeah, so this is what the presentation is going to cover. So where we've got to, some achievements, what we've still got to do before the end of the project, and then just thinking a little bit beyond the end of the project. So this, I guess, is what we're really about, knowledge sharing, and our kind of overarching objectives are to ensure that the policies are actually working. So they're delivering and they're enabling member states to comply with their obligations. And at the same time, we're looking to sustain an active platform. So to develop that network, because we know that that network will have benefits beyond this current phase of ENSMOV. And then we've got our three sort of specific objectives. So the first one is about facilitation and knowledge sharing amongst member states to do with Article 7 ED. So that's about organisation and making the network operate effectively. Then we're developing a suite of tools and resources that people can use as they're developing their policy measures and beyond. And then finally, we're assisting with the very important tasks that Ulrika mentioned around monitoring, verification. And indeed, we kind of touched on evaluation a bit as well, given that it's all connected. And thinking about the connections, we have made other connections with other Horizon projects. So on evaluation, on how to measure savings. So like we had an event with StreamSave, for instance, on fuel poverty. So that you mentioned, Ulrika, as a kind of a real future challenge. We've been working with Social What, and there are other collaborations as well that we've undertaken. Then we've got our kind of 4 segments. So first of all, identifying what needs to be done. Secondly, really making sure we involve the stakeholders in working out what needs to be done, and also developing the resources that can help with the implementation, the main part of our work, which is actually facilitating knowledge exchange. And then finally, tracking our achievements and leaving something there for posterity that people can use going forwards. So just a little bit about each of those segments. So first of all, I think we did a really good job actually of scanning what's out there at the beginning. So even when we put our proposal in, we've done an initial needs assessment. We did a gap analysis, which was based on a survey that we undertook of stakeholders, not just policymakers, but also people that are involved in delivering the policy measures. Well, here you can see the 15 gaps that were identified. I'm not going to go through them all, but you can see that generally these topics informed what we then looked at in each cycle. But as Vlasic said, we always went back at the beginning of each cycle to check in, because everyone knows the last 3 years has been a period of immense change. And just a little, if you click on that list of all tools, there's a really useful resource there, which is basically a kind of database of the tools that are already out there that can help member states to develop their policies or their MEP systems in the gaps that we identified. So then thinking about developing the knowledge exchange, these are just some of the materials that you can find on the website, and you can see actually the one on the top left there, effects of COVID and how that affected the implementation of Article 7. So this is an example of how the programme evolved over its 3-year period. And you can see there's a really diverse set of resources there, from really, really techie stuff on how to set up MRV systems or how fuel suppliers fulfill their EEOs, to more an additionality guidelines there. And if I was to scroll down, which I can't because it's a screenshot, but you'd be able to see that there's more kind of light touch policy publications as well. For example, we did one recently around the status of negotiations. So, how can you think about preparing in your member state for what's coming next? And then the implementation itself. Well, there aren't photos of people in rooms like this for the reasons I said at the beginning. There's lots of screenshots of people online. And well, I've already talked about it. I think there's just a really good set of resources available online, all the measures, and you can see some of yourselves on screen just there. And then finally, the last segment is around tracking achievement and also just making sure that the resources are there for the future. And here's our knowledge transfer platform online. And it's not only got all of those publications I was talking about earlier, but also information about individual member states. And if you were to click on one of these countries, you'd find a beautiful picture of one of our colleagues, Jean-Sébastien, and some information about say, must be about 15 years old, isn't it, that country? So what have we still got to do? So we're still producing analysis, like little pieces of analysis. So we're expecting to still publish a policy brief or two before the end of the project. Personally, I'm working on one on auctions. Oh, hello. Excuse me. Okay. Yeah, there's one on auctions coming up, and also we're going to do another one, I think, on the status of negotiations if things have changed sufficiently by November. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. And then we also have some key deliverables still to get out there. So, and they are around, thank you. So, assistance to the policy outcomes in the national context, that's led by our colleagues at Wuppertal. And while we're continuing the capacity building, I think we have another online event coming up, at least one. And then one of the final outputs, I guess the final major output, will be the recommendations on policy implementation, which will be bringing together the lessons from all of the things I just talked about. I'm leading that one at RAB, and I can tell you, I've been trawling through all of the documents that we produced, and there's a real goldmine of policy advice in there. So I'm trying to put that into a coherent whole at the moment, and the people that are here in the afternoon can hear a little bit about how that's progressing. And then, so beyond the project, so, well, I put a couple of screenshots of some of the materials we produced that are actually really useful for beyond the project. So one at the top there is that's a policy brief about the state of negotiations, and we're going to hear about that in the next session. A policy guide around how to alleviate energy poverty through energy efficiency obligation schemes. So this is something that was identified as a gap in the current project, but when we look forward to the next project, well, clearly this is going to be a much more topical issue given the way the negotiations are going, and there's a lot more we can do in that space. And then, well, I put a big question mark because there's just absolutely lots and lots of things that still need to be done. As you said already, the energy efficiency is complicated. It's really varied. It covers all the different sectors, and every technology pretty much can be made more energy efficient. People can change their behaviour. The current context also provides a challenge for Article 7, right? Because energy prices are sky high. People are making changes to their behaviour as a result of things that aren't to do with policy, or very difficult to unravel from the impact of policy. So there's all sorts of challenges ahead for Article 7, or soon to be Article 8. And I look forward to being part of ENSMOV Plus with many of you in the room to help answer those problems. So thank you very much. Here's another list. Here's another chance to see all of our wonderful partners on the screen. Thanks a lot.
Ready?
Of course.
You took the agenda.
Yes, it's on the agenda. Do we have
It's not here anymore. Okay, anyway. We are moving to our first panel debate, led by Dario, and I invite for our panelists, Antonin, Samuel, and Radosh. Radosh is not arrived yet, but then we can start slowly. And I also thank a lot. We have some people in the room, and we are even double online, which is very good. And I don't think, Vlasis, you mentioned it, but all countries are represented, which is really good. Dario, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marina. Oh, it's please accommodate. We like comfort, not only energy efficiency, And unfortunately, Radoš is not here yet, so I will have a long introduction, half an hour, so that will arrive. So I'm very glad to be here with you all in presence, in reality, and I'm also happy to see that nobody has got older since our last time. Maybe just more experts thanks to all the ENSMOV webinars over the years. And also the last workshop in presence from ENSMOV was in December 2019 in France, in Paris. So a lot of time has passed since that meeting. And a lot of things have changed, as Sam was reminding us. So theoretically now Radoš should have introduced the news. Oh, here he is. So, as I said, just the right length of the presentation to wait for Radoš. Hello, Radoš. Nice to have you here with us. We give him time to prepare himself. In the meantime, one of the changes that we are facing is that we usually had an issue with the demand. So how to stimulate the demand for energy efficiency, renewable, etc. And presently, maybe we have the opposite, an issue for the supply. So how to ensure that we have the technology we need, the logistic we need, and the microphone we need, and also the people that ensure that all this technology works. So Marine is doing an extra work today. And so I think this is really important because we have to put together traditional policies aimed at facilitating, supporting, stimulating the installation of energy efficiency technology with policies that facilitates the development of the technologies, the fact that we have them available, and the fact that we have the people we need, designers, installers, ESCOs, etc. Because we are already facing shortage in some countries due to the push from our policies. And I think this is an interesting point to deal with in the future ENSMOV Plus project. So, Radoš, I'd like to have you introducing the news that deal with the Energy Efficiency Directive and in particular Article 7. So you can come here if you want. We'll give you this nice equipment that hopefully will work.
Yes, normally it works.
The floor to you.
Yes. Good morning. Thank you, Dario, for this great introduction of the topic. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for running for many of us, especially as I am involved in the negotiations of the coming EED. And I was asked a tricky question to present what is coming up. Well, I don't know. No, that's up to the result of the negotiations. That's not up to me. That's not up to my colleagues in the Commission. That's really now in the hands of the Council and of the Parliament. And we don't have much of control of what they will agree. But we are guiding them with our expertise. So the only thing that I could present you is still the Commission proposal, because that's a document that stands. It might be a document that you know. And we as the Commission, we are hoping that this will be also guiding the negotiations, not necessarily always being stubborn on going that line, but the direction is there. And I'm pretty confident that out of the negotiations will come and something that is quite close to what the Commission proposal was, taking into account, of course, the Repower EU, because that increases the ambition for energy efficiency and for many other energy areas. So let me start by recalling what the main rules on the implementation, on the monitoring and on verification of the energy savings obligations are. First, you can find them in the current 2018 EED, in particular in the Annex 5. You also find them in the Commission guidance document, which the Commission published in the form of a recommendation There is a lot of sort of good practices and the ideas how Commission would see it well implemented. It's not a binding document on the member states, though. And then you have the governance regulation, and in particular the Annex 3, which requires member states to submit a plan with measures. And that plan, at the same time, is an enabling condition for the structural funds. So member states who didn't, and there still are member states who didn't submit this plan for 2030, which is based on the, now we could say old or now the current EED. So those will not be able to use the structural funds for energy efficiency, unfortunately. So these are the different tools and systems for implementation, monitoring, and verification. Now, let me come to what's coming up. And those three elements which are on this slide, there are the most important three elements in the EED recast. Maybe let me frame it, why do we have so few in the EED recast on the energy savings obligation. It is because this was one of the three elements that was reviewed in 2018. It was a very complex agreement. It's quite a complex structure. What is still Article 7A and 7B, which is becoming in the recast 8, 9, and 10. And we didn't want, something that was difficultly agreed and it works. We didn't want to revise it completely. So we looked only in what are the most important changes. Number one, increased annual savings obligation in end use from 0.8% to 1.5%. That means almost doubling. That corresponds actually to the increase of the general energy efficiency target. So this is the number one. And then there are things which, as compared to this very, very big change, I would call them details, but obviously for the subject of this conference, they are very important. And such are the exclusion from savings coming from direct fossil fuel combustion. That means member states still can subsidize more efficient gas boilers, but it will not count for Article 8. Yeah, so they will have to do something else on top of that as well, which will count for Article 8. And the final point, which is very important, is the just transition, which we would call a sub-target. It's a requirement to achieve a share of the total amount of energy savings among vulnerable customers and energy poor. Yeah, this is really the just transition part where we are saying as the Commission, no one shall be left behind in the energy transition, and we shall make a particular attention to the energy poor household and to the vulnerable customers. So I have been speaking about this. You can see that the 1.5% corresponds to something that in the current metrics we would call 36 to 37% energy efficiency. We changed the metrics though to have it more up to date, to be based on the most recent forecasts of where the consumption in 2030 will be. And we call these 36% now 9%, but it's the same. In overall EU target, it's the same. It's just that we changed the baseline. Well, we have also in the recast EU, or Repower EU, we have increased the ambition from 9% to 13%. And the correspondence in terms of energy savings obligation would be an increase from 1.5% to 1.8%, but that's really purely in the hands of the co-legislators. You might have seen the European Parliament report, which is asking for 2%. You might have seen the general approach of the Council, which is asking sort of a staged come-in of the obligation over a longer period of time, not from one day to the other. Here you can see what it makes if it comes into force from one day to the other. This is the famous calculation of the cumulative savings. Because while you will read in the law, it's 0.8 until now, and as from the entry into force, as from the transition period of the new recast, it shall be 1.5. Actually, the obligation is over accumulation of these savings over the whole 10 years. So basically, the obligation is a sum of all these little numbers over the 10 years. Yeah, you start in 2021 with 0.8%, and that must remain until the end of the 10 years period. It gives flexibility to the member states to put these numbers a little bit differently across over the time, but beware that if you miss the 0.1 at the beginning, you will have to do 10 times more at the end. Yeah, because we would be missing all this accumulation over the 10 years period. And so the contribution to the just transition, I've been already speaking about it. This is just a little bit more in detail. I think I'll skip it. You might get the slides then if you are interested into more details. And this is similar. We come to something I haven't spoken yet before. And there we come really into the nitty-gritty of the verification and of how to calculate the savings. We have seen in the past that member states were notifying us tax measures and claiming big savings coming from the tax measures. And we have been thinking how to best verify the savings from the tax measures. And we have seen that the most relevant indicators are the short-run price elasticity. So we set them as a default for claiming savings from tax measures. And if the member state is using different price elasticities, then they have to provide explanations. And here are some clarifications on the materiality and additionality with other EU measures. Firstly, there is a clarification that measures which are taken under the effort sharing regulation cannot be counted sort of without anything else. But if there is an energy efficiency measure which contributes to the effort sharing regulation, of course, but which aims at energy efficiency at the same time, and it's a concrete measure that is considered as material and additional when it fulfills, obviously, the rules in Annex 5. A second point is, what about the ETS sectors? And there, very similarly, savings in the ETS sectors that are made under concrete energy efficiency measures, they do count fully as energy efficiency measures under the future Article 8. However, where there is no additional measure and the EU ETS is the only measure that leads to savings, this is not additional. And this alone wouldn't allow member states for counting that under Article 8. A third point I would like to mention is that additionality must be shown also regarding the Union's emission standard for new vehicles. Yeah. Again, the Union standards alone will lead to energy efficiency. Article 8 alone will not satisfy the overall ambition for energy efficiency. It will be part of the job. That's why we have the other rules. The other rules will make another part of the job on the energy efficiency. And unless there is a specific energy efficiency measures, just the fact that these other EU rules exist cannot be counted under Article 8. And last slide, what about planning and reporting? That continues to be done in accordance with the governance regulation. The NECPs, they remain the key source for planning in the first place. And then the biannual reports, those will be sources for the reporting. Member states, they must submit information on new saving rates, on new policy measures, and on new calculations of what these policy measures will save. in the updated NECPs. The Commission is already working very closely with the member states to get the best out of the NECPs updates. If you have any influence on what will be in those ones, please use it. We want that to be the major instruments for this destiny, to lead us out of the crisis and to lead us to energy transition. So the planning and reporting of the calculation of the amounts of energy savings to be achieved over the period 21 to 2030, that will be done again in accordance with Annex 3 of the governance regulation. And member states will have to demonstrate the contribution of Article 8 energy savings to the national contributions in Article 4. So basically you have the specific measure, Article 8, these energy savings obligations, and member states will have to show how they expect this to help them with the overall energy efficiency contribution. The one that I said that in the original Commission proposal was 9%, and then in the adjusted proposal, it would be 13% for the EU, which would be then distributed among the member states. Voila, thank you for your attention.
Radosh? Yes, it's working. I think we will have time to ask Radosh some questions, and I'd like to involve you all in that. But first, I'd like to hear from Anthony what the view and the proposals from the coalition are. Keep also in mind that here we have the Fit for 55 package, and it's a part, but we also have a REPowerEU proposal that adds some new targets and challenges to the Fit for 55.
Of course, I hope this works. Yes. So thank you for this opportunity to talk on behalf of the coalition. I think I want to mention maybe one point first, because the title of this session is Article 7 or Article 8 now, what's new? I think one part of it, what is new, is what we're experiencing from the past year of the problem with the energy security crisis and the problem of the supply side that pushes member states to adopt national energy savings measures in the short term. We are seeing this before next winter, so it makes sure that we're capable to have enough energy for the next winter, and the EU is also structuring that with now the gas demand reduction plan, the electricity, for me as well, the electricity demand reduction plan of 50 and 10%. Those are voluntary for member states, but this pushes member states to really adopt national energy savings plan in the short term. And I think maybe the link is not enough made with Article 8 on that front. There's definitely, what we're seeing is that a lot of those measures are short-term measures, behavioral change measures. We all heard of the reducing the thermostat by 1 or 2 degrees, trying to do more teleworking, taking the bike to work. I think it also needs to be seen because those short-term measures are going to do a lot of energy savings benefit in the short term. For example, to take an example, the France Plan de Sobriété Énergétique aims at reducing energy consumption by 10% in the next 2 years compared to 2021. So that's really substantial. And it remains to be seen also how the savings could be possibly counted for Article 8, also with the additionality and materiality, and how far those savings can then help member states achieve their targets. Of course, the period being cumulative and being one period with, as Radosh showed, the increase of savings over time. It won't do the whole savings over the period, but it will definitely help member states achieve their national target for 2022, 2023, 2024. So it can be a possibility for member states to push those savings forward, but also it should be, for me, the way that Article 8 is structured, it's actually an incentive for member states to put in place rather longer term measures to face the current crisis, but also in the next months, next years, so those savings can be counted in the way that Article 8 is structured. So cumulative, and as Radosh explained, a saving that is not made in 2021, it will have to be 10 times higher if it's made in 2030, because the way Article 8 is framed. Also, When it comes to behavioral change measures, of course, this is also a very particular type of measure that can be counted for Article 8 under certain circumstances. So I think also Article 8 and of course everything that is happening is another incentive for member states to make sure that those behavioral change last in the long run and that become really structural change in the way people use energy and see energy used in their daily life. So I wanted to mention that because, and maybe that's also a point for the next ENSMOV Plus project, to see how the current energy savings plan are being reflected in Article 8 at the moment and how the interlinkages how Article 8 could be actually an incentive for member states to do more longer term and structural measures when it comes to energy savings and energy efficiency.
Yes, also because one of the risks is that they should go towards only very fast measures. Nowadays, afterwards, it was become more difficult to implement the complex ones and the long-term ones.
Exactly, and also we know that the way Article 8 is made, early action is rewarded because it stays old over the period. So I think there should be also communication to member states saying, yes, we know we want to survive the next winter, but also putting a longer term, and that's what we're trying to do as well from the side of the coalition, have really this longer term aspect in mind for 2030, but also beyond for really long-term energy efficiency improvements. The other points on what's new, and Radosh also mentioned it quickly, we don't know what's going to be the results of Article 8's negotiations. I can maybe explain a bit briefly as well what's on the table, both from the side of the Parliament and the Council compared to the Commission proposal. And Radosh mentioned that already, but so the Parliament wants to increase the energy savings obligation annual rates to 2%, which is more or less in line of the overall energy efficiency target we want to propose, which is 14.5%. Radosh was mentioning that 13% is about 1.8 annual rate for the energy saving obligation. So this is more or less in the range. We have indeed this phasing approach on the side of the Council, so 1.1% in 2024, 1.3% in 2026, and finally 1.5% in 2028. When it comes to the fossil fuel exclusion, both the Parliament and the Council wants to allow some savings coming from fossil fuel combustion to be counted in specific circumstances. So this is another point that will be dealt in the trilogue. Maybe also one point to mention is that the Council wants national ETS and EU ETS savings that are resulting from those systems to be able to be counted compared to the Commission proposal. So this is another point that will have to be addressed. I know there is a panel afterwards on energy poverty, so I'm not going to dwell too much on the proposal on that side from Article 8. Maybe one last point I want to mention, which I think also what in the spirit of what is new, is that we have in the Commission proposal the proposal that the obligation period doesn't stop in 2030, continues, and then an annual rate the next obligation period that would be 2030 to 2040. And also, we don't see an amendment or a proposal from both the Parliament and the Council. This is not okay. So in the sense, it's a recognition for both institutions that Article 8 is really a structural tool when it comes to energy efficiency in Europe. They want this tool to remain even after 2030. Of course, for instance, the Council wants that's part of the saving extra that's been delivered within today's period, so until 2030 can be counted for the next period. So there is also some discussions on this. But I think it's the recognition for all co-legislators that Article 8 is really an important tool. We'll see also in the update of MEPs how this increase in ambition and also the way the savings can be counted will be reflected by member states. I think all in all, from the coalition, we're very happy that Article 8 remains a tool, is strengthened, and will really remain an integral part of the energy efficiency framework in the next years.
Yeah, for sure, the targets are rising, and now they are coupled with reasons that goes beyond decarbonization and are more practical, so for companies, people, and also policymakers. So how do you think this will affect? We were speaking before that, yes, there is this need to have a strategic approach towards energy efficiency. But in practice, what do you think will happen in the next years?
Compared to the energy security crisis that we have, I think, and that's what I was trying to mention, I think we should avoid the case that energy savings plans this winter and next winter is then retroactively seen as a way by member states to fulfill their Article 8 targets. saying, let's see what savings can be counted because we put those plans into account. We had voluntary agreements, and that's again taking the French example. We had voluntary agreements with businesses that said that they would reduce their energy consumption ahead of next winter. We achieve our 10% global energy consumption target at French level. Again, depending what measures France is putting in their Article 8. But globally, I think really it should be seen as something that is not a European objective that we need to fulfill, but really something that is structuring the mind of implementers at member state level, and that they see this as yet another opportunity to put in place energy efficiency improvements. We have the Repower EU that increased the energy efficiency target to 13%. We'll hopefully have a more ambitious energy efficiency targets. I mean, also what we should avoid is that those national energy savings plans deliver a lot of savings in the short term, but then those behavior changes I was mentioning, maybe they won't be kept over the longer run, and that would actually end up in a rebound of energy consumption for example, for individuals, and that is not in line with the overall 2030 energy target, which is an absolute reduction of energy consumption. So even though you have a lot of savings that are being counted in the first year of the period, and maybe that's a lot of savings under your Article 8, you should ensure that those savings then cannot, let's say, be de-linked for the actual reduction of energy consumption, which is the goal of the overall framework. Yeah.
Thank you. Sam, so MEP is doing a lot of work on the policy side. You have a very good observatory of what happens. What are your views on this topic?
Well, I thought I'd think about what the implications would be for member states, and also particularly the people in the audience here, so the policy implementers, the people that need to comply with Article 8, as it seemed to be. And Anton actually made some very important points that I was going to touch on as well around the behavioural responses to the campaigns that are out there at the moment. As practitioners, we're going to need to work out what the impact is of those policy measures and how to account for them under Article 8. And as everyone says, it's going to be a complicated task, and it definitely is going to require work from people in this room to help work out what the methodology should be, and also to put in place evaluation programs that enable the impact of these policy measures to be disassociated from the impact of just high prices by themselves. Because as Dario already mentioned, we're kind of facing a supply crisis at the moment for energy efficiency, and that's because, well, it's partly because the demand for energy efficiency is now so high, given that the prices are so high. But of course, the other driver of the increased demand for energy efficiency is policy, and policy has been ramping up, and the Fit for 55 package, the implications of that are that there are going to need to be many more energy efficiency policy measures in place to drive the changes that we need to see. And I think what we can see that the change to Article 7, Article 8, compared to in the old regime, is that in the old regime, kind of any energy efficiency would do. It didn't really matter because we weren't kind of pressured by the urgent need for both decarbonisation and energy security alleviation. But now we really do have to drive carbon efficiency through energy efficiency and also tackle the energy security problem. And I think and also at the same time, cope with the challenge that all of that creates for people at the lower end of the income spectrum and those who are vulnerable to high energy prices. And I think we see that the 55 package, as Radosh says, really highlights that need. So it's really about making carbon reductions, so energy efficiency driving carbon reductions, and we see the fossil fuel exclusion provision in the Parliament's in the Commission's proposal. And while the Council and the Parliament are taking different positions on that, I think basically it means that as practitioners, we're going to need to be subsidising or helping people put in place electrification, mostly, of their heating systems, while at the same time the more traditional fabric improvement measures in buildings. So that's kind of one implication for policy measures, but there's also an implication for how that's accounted for. I think that the guidance at the moment is a little, could be improved there and tightened up to show that you can make big savings from electrification, because heat pumps are basically so energy efficient. And under Article 7, the ambient heat that is used is not counted. So basically, just the electricity you use to transfer the heat from the air or the ground or water to inside your building. It's only that small amount of energy that needs to be counted. So there's really big savings, and we can help to show that. We're also going to need to think about the transport sector. Very few savings in the transport sector come on under Article 8, and that's partly because, as Velosh says, it's very difficult to make savings from new vehicle policy. But there are all of these other structural changes that the likes Antonin was talking about that mean that people are switching modes or travelling less, and part of that is policy driven. So how can we account for that better? I think that's another big challenge. And then in the industry sector, where I think Article 7, 8 is already doing a fairly good job, but we're going to need to see some more transformational change there. And I think linked to the energy audits aspect of the Energy Efficiency Directive, I think there's going to be many more policy measures that are going to be driving the take-up of audit measures, which I hope will enable the increased ambition to be delivered. Finally, on energy poverty, there's another challenge there about having measured, because as we know, a lot of people in energy poverty are already under consuming energy relative to what they would do if they could afford it. Right? They would probably rather consume more energy, have a more comfortable existence. So are you actually going to get energy savings counting towards Article 3, Article 4 from energy efficiency measures in the energy poor sector? Probably not. But should you be able to count them for Article 8? Yeah, I'd say so. So again, there's a sort of a technical challenge for how do you account for savings in that sector, given that it's a key objective of the Fit for 55 package, but won't necessarily deliver energy savings. So just a few thoughts about the kind of techie side of delivering on the Fit for 55 package and what it's going to mean for the future work for people in this sector.
Thank you, Sam. I'm too optimistic because I'm seeing, at least in Italy, interesting transformation. For example, the Chamber of Commerce are trying to put in place actions to support the enterprises, companies on the territory to implement, let's say, group or district actions together. We have now tools like the ISO 50009 and ALCO 50005 that should help in this regard. And I think even if the driver is now the high energy prices, it is interesting because it's something that, in a sense, will build the strategic aspect. I wonder, do you have any questions for our panelists, since we have this possibility? You are.
Yes, okay. Just one question. It's very difficult for me to understand how to manage Article 8 and new ETS. Can you give us some explanation to how manage both together?
New ETS.
Yes, new ETS particularly regarding housing and cohabitation between two mechanisms.
Thanks. It is really up to the member states to decide how they will do it. We will not prescribe a method on how to do that. But one of the possibilities we were thinking about is, use the synergies as much as possible. Use the common entry points of data and common entry points of obligation as much as possible. And the ETS is really about energy price. Yeah, so what it will do, it will increase price. It's not about some sort of sophisticated methods. It's really price increase. Yeah. In the transport sector and in the buildings, this is meant to look like that it is the energy providers who will levy these ETS extra payments. Yeah. So it's not the end users who will pay for it separately, but it is the providers. So sort of imagine petrol stations, imagine gas and electricity providers. Yeah. In some member states, these are already captured under the EEOs, under the obligation schemes. And therefore, administrative reasons, it will obviously be important to bring these two measures in a smooth and corroborating way. If you have a member state who is relying entirely on alternative measures, let's say renovation of buildings, well, they will continue the renovation of buildings organized by the energy agencies. And at the same time, they will be asking the electricity utilities and the gas utilities to levy a price on electricity, on gas. So a household will have higher energy prices, and at the same time, it will receive subsidies if they decide to renovate their building.
Okay, other questions?
Maybe there are some online, people can
Yeah.
take them.
No questions. So
Can I just ask the question of the questioner? Were you talking about the EU ETS, one or two, doesn't really matter, or were you talking about national emissions trading scheme? Were you talking about the EU level ETS or national ETSs? Because I know in Germany and Austria we have.
It was more so to explain how to understand, particularly for housing and transportation,
Right.
How both will be communicated so far as energy efficiency obligation is already in the energy cost contracts. So we have a combination of in the price of energy, you have a combination of both scheme. So it can be in opposition, in fact, because maybe you are not able to have in price of scale already, and it can be seen in France. It's seen as quite an opposition because the white certificates are huge, so the consequences in the price is huge already. So have an addition in housing price scheme, it can be complicated to manage lots. That's why I asked this question, because it's not clear for everybody, because it's new.
So I'm going to ask a question. I was speaking with a public officer some days ago, and a question that I used to hear a lot of time in the ENSMOV and ENSMOV projects came again to life. So, do we need to go towards simplification or toward complexity with MEP, additionality, and other things? I was thinking also to all the different targets and sub-targets of the 55 packages and their relation, like this question highlight. What is your view on this point? Because of course we have topics like additionality and MEP, which is exemplary, and the right use of them is for sure very good. But on the other hand, they are complicated to put in place and also to monitor. So I wonder, what do you think about that?
Shall I start?
Yeah. Yes.
I would first sort of look at what is simplicity and what is complexity. And for me, simplicity is Article 4. That's you have to reduce energy consumption by so much. And complexity is Article 8 or Article 7 nowadays. And that is you have to show every single saving that was reached by which measure and show how you calculated it from the window until your addition of the 1.5 or 0.8%. And yes, we have been asking ourselves this question as well. And I think, I mean, looking at the member states, at the national administrations, we have a huge variety of administrations and of administrative cultures, of implementations, etc. And frankly speaking, to some of them, it would fit better to have just a target. And to others, it fits better to have concrete measures where they, tick the boxes, do the measures, do the exact calculations, and whether they hit the target with it or not, they see it as something that is outside of the scope of their possibilities. Yeah. So I think a combination is quite good. And to these two, I would say, positions of simplicity and complexity, the Commission in the proposal has added Article 5 for public bodies, being a sort of, I would almost say an experimental try to test what the answer to this question could be. Because there it concerns the public sector, so there the administrations, they have more or less quite a good control of what could be done. And we are asking for annual total energy consumption reduction. So there is an exploration in the upcoming legislation to this question.
I would just have one in the same idea thoughts to add. Of course, I've been working on the EED for the past 2 years, so this is also from what I see from the past EED. Indeed, we have this simplicity against complexity, but it's also because the energy efficiency target is indicative. We have at the moment in the current EED. So why also Article 8 became complex is because we have an indicative target. So we need at least to make sure that the measures to achieve the target are countable, are additional, and we need to make sure that this is a really good tool to achieve that target, which is indicative. So to keep track on member state progress. So I think this is one of the reasons why Article 8 became de facto complex, is because also the targets, both at EU level and national level, for energy efficiency is indicative at the moment. We'll see what happened with the trilogues, but I think also that was one of the reasons of the complexification of Article 8 de facto.
So once again, I'm going to steal my thunder. I think that's exactly the right point, because Article 4 is a indicative. I mean, I guess a general kind of mantra might be as simple as possible, as complex as necessary. I know that's a bit kind of trite, but I think experience has shown that it's actually necessary to have a ring fence for energy poverty, which obviously adds complexity, but it will drive action in a sector that, for one reason or another, has just not seen enough action, unless there are ring fences, which we've seen in some national schemes, like in France, in the UK and Ireland, for example. But when we've seen more kind of just uplifts or something like that, incentives to do action in energy poor homes, it hasn't really worked. So Austria, the best place in the world to live, or whatever it is, the most advanced country, when you have an uplift, you actually see, it's a very small percentage that's actually achieved in that group. So I think that is a necessary complexity, actually, if you want to achieve your wider social objectives. I mean, I think you could make it even more complex. So the one thing that I see that's lacking from action amongst member states in the EU at the moment is really good evaluation of the energy savings, not just evaluation of, what the costs were, or, whether people got the measures or not, but actually what the measures are delivering by using heaters, not necessarily in all buildings, but, having really, really good evaluations where you actually work out what the energy savings were. But I'm not obviously putting an evaluation requirement into Article 8. It's a bit late for that, but I know the Parliament was thinking about it as one of the amendments, but it didn't make it through the compromise process, probably because of the additional complexity that it would give. But that is the one thing that's lacking. So if it doesn't come in Article 8, we need to find some other way of driving evaluation, I think, amongst member states. And my fear is that actually Article 8 acts as a disincentive for evaluation, Because if you do an evaluation and it turns out, well, we haven't actually saved as much as we were hoping, well, what are you going to report to the Commission? So at the moment, the way things are set up, it's kind of actually not really providing the right level of incentives to get member states to actually work out what's going on. And just one last thing, I was on a call with sorry, I may have sound like I'm showing off, but it was with the White House and your DG on Monday. It was a really interesting knowledge exchange about demand reduction measures that are happening in the EU at the moment, like the society plan, and then what they do in the US in the states that are progressive. And the one thing I really took away was their relentless focus on getting value for money for the people that are paying the bills in the US, which is quite often bill payers, but it might be taxpayers. You have to do an evaluation, otherwise you basically just don't get funded. And the evaluation has to really work out what's going on. That's kind of lacking in the EU at the moment. So I'm really changing the subject a bit, but hang on.
Thank you. And by the way, energy will be one of the topic of panel 3, but in the meantime, we are panel 2 with the Vlasis, and we'll speak about energy poverty. By the way, to answer some possible question about participants, also not here in presence, you will receive the presentation. You will also get the registration for the speakers agree. So don't worry about that. Vlasis. Okay. Thank you very much to our panelists for very interesting views.
No. Stéphane is online.
Okay. Definitely comes back. I shall take this one.
Benoit.
Okay. So. All right. So we are going to move now to the panel, to the second panel on energy poverty. We have originally we envisaged to have more people physically, but we have sicknesses around. So we have online Stefan Buzarovsky from the University of Manchester. You know that he's quite very well in this debate of the energy poverty all these years. Stefan.
So, thank you. Do you want me to start?
Wait a second, let's just make a short intro. Then Guillaume Joly from BEU, from Consumer Association in Europe. Thank you, Guillaume also. Benoit from FPEN. Here you are the physical person we have. And also we're expecting Teresa Risegui from DGNR, but she's also on sick leave today. So she will present a bit the Article 8 in relation to the energy poverty. Although I think that with Rados she has made a nice introduction and we get the overall feeling and we get the overall knowledge of what it is about in hand. So I got some notes from Teresa, which she would like, that's more or less what she would like to discuss, and I can briefly say them on her behalf here, is that indeed we have seen that the energy saving obligations, because that's what the key part in this debate, they have contributed to creating some powerful policy measures and also to national level targeting and youth sectors. And now the reporting on the share of the savings to be achieved, as it was mentioned before, for the specific target of the Article 8, for the expected and achieved savings, actually they will progress in the framework of the well-established governance mechanism. I think this was, also well explained. And then we see that the EED, together with the other initiatives of the Fit for 55 package, like the Social Climate Fund, which is the one that we have to see how it goes, depending on the percentages, finally the co-finance percentage, how it will end up. It will change a lot the picture. They create a framework to address the social needs and to turn the transition into some durable opportunities. So we consider that, and I think that's a common understanding to all, that the Social Climate Fund, if let's say it goes to the full financing or even to the 50% co-financing or whatever it will end up, and the recast, they are complementary, they should act complementary on that. And they are the ones to provide financial resources to achieve the objectives, also through clean energy transition measures for the low-income groups and the energy poor groups. Here we also have a debate, of course, of the low-income groups and the energy poor groups, because the low-income groups, we know it's a first income quintile, but the energy poverty runs also into the second income quintile. In some countries also it goes up to the third income quintile. So we have to see actually up to what percentage of the population will be affected from that part. Now, another thing is that maybe it's better. Okay. So another thing is that the Article 8 obligation and the sets from the EEOs actually can help the energy poor households and should not be seen as competitive with the social policies. That's something that comes always across, that whether we use social policies, counting savings, and there is a competition between these measures, and it should not be like that, but they should be rather acting as complementary to the existing social actions that member states have also in place, also on the short-term measures now, but also on the longer-term measures that are in place. And as it's well heard, that there should be prioritization on among the vulnerable customers, and that's what at least we expect to see. So there are some ideas in place and some discussions we already had with the panel, and I would like to have the views. Starting from the main question that we have heard what the Article 8 already presupposes in its current format on the energy poverty. We do have several studies running showing that funding, in the end of the day, even with the Social Climate Fund and the other parameters, and the other funding streams that will come in, might not be enough given the increased costs, especially for the low-income groups and the second-income quintile groups. And the question then comes, and here I would need really the first opinion from Stefan, who has long experience in checking the policies and evaluating all these policies from the member states, whether you consider that the target set under the Article 8 provides substantial room for the energy poverty alleviation in the current context that we have now in Europe. So, Stefan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And sorry for cutting in earlier. I lost the signal, so I wasn't sure what was happening, but thank you for the invitation. I'm going to just have a few propositions to make around this, and also in response to what you said. I think the Article 8 is really quite a revolutionary development in energy poverty policy, and those of us who've been working in this field. Can you hear me now? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, Stefan, please go repeat because your sound was...
Right. Okay, let me just check. I think it should be
you.
fine. If there's an issue, I lost the contact earlier as well. So I was saying just that it's a really very significant development in terms of the history of energy poverty alleviation, and in the context of what's being done, it's quite an important measure. I think there are several challenges around this. I think in the previous panels, some of them were already raised. The first one is how we measure energy poverty. The fact is we don't really have one way of measuring it. We can say that it's an income-based problem, but the measures at the moment that we have may lead us to very different understandings of energy poverty. The fact is that even under the current indicators that are being proposed, those are not going to lead to the full range of energy poor households being included. And indeed, I can tell you with the EU Energy Poverty Observatory, even when we did this at the EU level, even under the highest indicators that were expenditure-based, we still did not get to the number of people in the European Union who are considered socially excluded or income poor. So we would get to, say, 70 million households under the maximum value, whereas you had 80 or so that are being socially excluded or vulnerable. So that's, I think, a very significant challenge. Another challenge is that I fear that this might become the only instrument to fight energy poverty in most countries, where we know that energy poverty is not just about, it's an important part of energy efficiency and income, but there are huge questions around social participation and representation that have to be dealt with at the member state level or through other measures. And again, I would say the Article 8 is not a panacea in this regard. And the third thing I wanted to say here is that how we count energy savings, this was mentioned in the previous panel, and what counts as energy savings from a technical point of view is really important, because you're not going to achieve energy savings in households that are energy poor to any significant degree, and there are so many projects, so much evidence to show this. You may have some marginal savings, and so the question is, what kind of policies will this encourage? If there's a target to achieve energy savings coupled with a target to protect vulnerable people, what kind of measures will they get under the overall national target because there is a target to achieve energy savings. Well, does that mean that energy savings get pushed on to everybody else? I mean, I don't know. This is like a really important, interesting question around the interaction among these different measures. Also, what counts as an energy savings we might need to think about. I know there was a complexity discussion in the previous panel, but maybe it's a useful level to consider the hypothetical level of energy consumption that is needed to achieve thermal comfort versus the actual level, which is below that. So there might be other ways of accounting for energy savings other than simply savings against the existing level of energy consumption. These are just some basic points here, but I do say I would just say it's a very important, very positive development. It's just that a lot of the details are in the fine print and the technicalities of how it's implemented. Thank you.
Stefan, we just missed the last sentence, but in the what we get from the overall part is identified as a positive policy development, and I think that we all commonly agree, because at least there is a target, there is a concrete target now on where a member state should stay met.
So
the same actually goes with all the other type of funding streams that we have, and all the other structural programs, because if we check, for instance, and that's work we try to do also within ENSMOV and other studies, is that when we checked, we try to do from the RRF and see how much of this funding streams go to the energy poor groups and take into account the overall energy efficiency allocation. We have seen so far that very few, almost, I think, non-member states, has allocated directly how much of the percentage from the energy efficiency would go to the energy poor groups. And I think that's already kind of a missing point that should definitely breach with the Article 8, because the RRF is one of the funding streams that will go directly to the energy poor groups. I don't speak about the SCF plans because it's not yet time for it, but at least for the RRF, I think member states should be already preparing and demonstrating how much percentage of their energy efficiency funds should go there. Now, another thing is that here I would like also the contribution of Guillaume and Benoit, is that we have seen that so far, if we take the historical analysis of the Article 7, that the energy efficiency obligations were the key instruments, I would say, that have delivered effectively savings on energy poor groups, and to some extent have alleviated energy poverty when, with all the various parameters they do have. For example, we have uplifting factors savings, we have concrete sub-targeting for energy poor groups and so forth. The question is, okay, EEOs are there. We see that they have worked when we had the allocation of savings there. What would you consider, based on your experience also, that would make the other types of measures the same effective to target energy poor groups? So let's start also from the EEOs. So what are the parameters of success that you would consider that we should take into account in order to help also other member states who are preparing EEO schemes to tackle energy poverty through the schemes? I would give the floor first to, let's start from Benoit, because you're next, and then we go to Guillaume. Okay.
I don't know. Does it work? Okay. Never mind. I will speak loudly. Just to keep some figures, in fact, in France, the only country I know, I'm sorry, since the energy poverty scheme has been putting in place in 2016, we observe a real evolution to address the distributional inequities before, and including for tax subvention, for instance. Only medium and high incomes were mainly targeted. It's logical, in fact, because that's who can afford investment for households. And particularly during the fourth period of French white certificate, 2018-2021, in fact, 43% of the white certificate generated has been generated in the energy poverty group. We'll speak about after a while. So this figure shows that it's very effective.
Okay. All right. So we see from France, which is kind of a traditional CDO, is one of the longer lasting schemes. Guillaume, from your side, as you represent the consumers, how would you see that these instruments work, or what type of characteristics you consider that these instruments should have in order to better tackle the energy poor groups?
Well, thanks. And yes, I will share with you the consumer's perspective. Starting, can you hear me? I will increase my mic. Can you hear me now?
No, we still cannot hear you, Guillaume, sorry.
Is there a setting I need to change?
Now you're fine. Now we can hear you well. Okay.
Now you hear me. Okay. So I was saying I will start with sharing Berg's views on the different targets that are set. I agree with Stefan that it's positively evolving in the EED, and that whatever the target is to be set by the member states, you need enabling measures to reach this target. And to lean on the presentation from Benoît Frère, he mentioned 2016. I would say in France, energy poverty has been in the public debate since more or less 20 years, not at the national level, but starting at the local level with all the associations and all the non-profits working with people on low income and struggling to keep warm during the winter. So here, what I want to raise is that whatever the target, you need societal engineering. You need people on the ground to talk to each other, to create a network, a platform, I would say. That's one of the main Berg's recommendation regarding EED, that you have mandatory creation of platform of stakeholders involved in tackling energy poverty to, well, basically have that capacity of identifying people. Because those platforms would become constituted by the national authorities, the ministries, also local authorities, social non-profits, but also energy non-profits and housing non-profits. All those people need to talk to each other. And I'm convinced that if you didn't have that ground on which the French program could foster, it would not have been that effective. So it's not only a matter of design of the energy efficiency obligation schemes, it's also on which ground it can grow. So here, that was the main point I wanted to make on those energy efficiency obligation schemes. They can't be a standalone. And the other part of the question was on the subsidies and how they can be made more effective. Here, I would like to stress that it's not only a matter of how much money you put on the table, it's how it's going to be disbursed and when. Because if you can't identify people struggling with their bills, well, identify and engage with these people. It's not only like having a placard in your city stating, oh, you are an energy poor, you are entitled to get a subsidy. People won't get into the stage to which they ask and apply for this, because it's out of dignity. So you need to engage with people, like you need those platforms to have this social interaction that will make people tick and apply to get the subsidies and to get into the programs. So it's subsidies and embedded into the societal network of support. And also the other question is when it's to be disbursed. If, as most subsidies, it's meant to be disbursed once the works with retrofit works are completed, then it's going to be a failure. Most of the money will remain idle, even if you have a huge budget. So you need to address the upfront cost. People on low income can't pay upfront. That's the main trick, right? So you need to address this. You need to combine the subsidies with financial instruments that allow money to be disbursed upfront. For example, revolving fund. so that the fund disbursed the money upfront to pay for the retrofit works, and then the fund is replenished by the different grants from the local authorities, from the national level, from other sources like foundations. And then you can have an efficient disperse of the subsidies. So that was sorry, go on.
You please go ahead because of the interruption. So you were just completing this part.
No, I just wanted to wrap it up on this question. We need a platform of stakeholders at the national level, including local stakeholders. And we need financial instruments to make subsidies disbursed efficiently.
Perfect, thank you. And it's clear. Comment here from your colleague from Benoit.
When we prepare, you ask us that's the same point, how to be efficient and how to target the right people, how to interest energy supplier, EEOs towards energy poverty households. And we had the experiment during the fourth period of white certification in France of special policy in creating €1 offers. That's why we have such a high level of white certificate for 40% in energy poverty, because it was created €1 offers dedicated both to people in energy poverty with different targets and also with special updates regarding application, type of households, pumpkins, insulation, and so on. And the point that was that type of offer was very simple, in fact. It was very simple to sell, and all the actors had basically good margins in working with energy poverty households. So that's why it was such a success and very numerous. The point that we have to cope with many difficulties in mastering the quality. And so that the bad side of this massification, that's a lack of control of the quality.
Mm-hmm. Actually, we get a question which links very much from Ernesto from Heberstock. And one of them is that if we know whether other circumstances related to the introduction of mandatory savings for energy poor households in all EU countries being considered. The question is that if we take Croatia, there was a public call for energy renovation of vulnerable energy customers, but it failed to spend all the funds for that sector. There was no response and interest from energy poor households. And so if this remains in the future, the potential introduction of such an obligation might have a negative effect. Also, there is that in some countries there is still no official definition, but there I will stick to it on the second part of this question. So how could we trigger, so it comes from you that you are also experienced, you monitor the effects, and also to Guillaume, and how could we trigger really the interest of the energy poor groups, apart from the high subsidy rate, if it's 100% or 90%, if we speak about low income, but how could we really trigger the interest? That's the question that comes up. We saw that it seems there was no interest, so practically this program failed. How could you say from your experience that we could achieve that? Or Guillaume, if you want to reply on that,
Yeah, I'm happy to step in regarding the energy savings. I think it's one thing to have a program properly designed and you roll out insulation and you reach out your quota of kilowatt per hour CUMAC. I won't enter into the French specificity, but it means like an energy supplier, you reach out your obligation. But does that mean that people get more comfort or energy savings? To me, it's important to have insulation, and that was properly done, hopefully for most of the time. But then the question is, how do you address the needs as a whole? You need also to have a change in the heating system. So I'm not saying that the energy efficiency obligation schemes need to address all the needs via their budgets, but they need to be combined with other solutions that the suppliers don't have to be standing alone to implement, but it needs to be consistent with what you need to be to have warmth in your home. So it's insulation, and for most of households, a change in the heating system. If you have a direct electric heating system, you can't really be warm. That needs to be changed, and that needs to be financed, coupled with the energy efficiency obligation schemes. Because the underlying question is who is paying? So you need to combine the different sources, because if it's reported on the over consumers, you don't want to have a slage for consumers just above the threshold of energy poverty, sliding into energy poverty. It's a never-ending problem. So you need to have a tipping point of retrofit works implemented that allow to get out, that allow households to get out of energy poverty for good.
Thank you, yeah, that's clear. Stefan, you also raised your hand there.
Just wanted, if you can hear me, I just wanted to make 2 points vis-a-vis this question and the previous one. So the first one, and you asked what is the most effective measure, and I still believe that there have to be, in every member state, there are structural obstacles on the way, and that every member state knows that are in the path of energy poverty alleviation, whether to do with how housing is organized, whether to do with how relations among utilities and households work, and so on. But on the other hand, I think one universal measure that we need to think about, and this also goes along the lines of what Guillaume said, is energy advice, energy assistance and energy advice at the very customized level is, I think, the key challenge in the period to come, because there needs to be an intermediary network to assist energy poor households, and I think that we cannot go much further without that, without sort of that network. I also am slightly, I have to say, while I think Article 8 is amazing as a development, the one thing I want to say is really the technicalities around it are very important, because I worry that it might create perverse incentives as because of that target among a poorly defined low-income population. It might result in, because we know that energy poor households are difficult, their homes are difficult to retrofit, and it's difficult to engage them. It might create a situation where only some part of this housing stock will be renovated and prioritized because to meet the target, right? Or there might be situations where measures that are not entirely sustainable, and I've seen gas boilers put in, for example, they are more efficient than previous heating systems, so they could count as an efficiency target. I don't know. So you have to have other measures that accompany this to ensure that, if you want to move towards a truly sustainable future and a truly socially just one, they have to work in sync. So the perverse incentives, I think, also need to be taken into account. Thanks.
Clear, and I think what you touched upon before I give the floor to Guillaume is that if we speak about the energy advice, which is indeed one of the top measures we'll consider for the energy poor groups, next to the subsidy ones, that is where you have the highest depreciation of savings, meaning that all the factors, when you have to see behavioral type of measures and the information type of measures, generate the less savings for the calculation of Article 7. While in reality, we know these are the ones that do work a lot on energy poor groups. So this is something that we need to consider when putting in all the technical specificities in practice. And 1 second, Guillaume, what you mentioned, Stefan, I think it's important. I would like to link also what you said before, is that the definition of the energy poor groups comes now into the reality for member states. So far, we do have several national action plans for energy poverty, some, at least not a lot. And in the Article 8, there is a prescription of how member states should, calculate the indicators for energy poverty, or if they cannot do it, they should have the average figures, which goes hand in hand with EPP and the governments. Is it, the question goes first to Stefan and then to Guillaume, and you can reply also the previous one. Is it, do you consider the indicators provided in the Article 8 are clear, are the ones that member states can use, Or should we go for one uniform indicator or for something easier or more complex? I said I should make a lot of work on that. So
I think they are a good first step. They are not perfect. I worry about if you have one indicator, you need multiple indicators. It's a really long discussion about what the best indicator is. Those indicators give us the really important thing is that those indicators can be more or less measured at the doorstep. So you have to have measures that work at the doorstep. But I would be in favor of a wider methodological discussion about what we can do to encompass a range of circumstances that include energy poverty. And that, I think, in my view, has to include the sufficiency principle. I don't want to go into that discussion, but we need to get into discussion of what is the actual needed level and how people are consuming as to in relation to a needed level of energy services. And that connects energy efficiency with energy sufficiency. So we're in the right direction, but I think we need a lot more work. But I'm in favor of multiple indicators, I should say, instead of one. Thank you.
okay, so that would you advocate the member states, if they could not use directly the ones provided by the Commission, at least to have multiple indicators to show exactly the proportion of the population that the targets that, yeah, this policy to target. Guillaume.
I would agree with Stefan. I would say we need a pool of indicators, not only energy, but also on health, on housing, and we need the platforms I mentioned to be able to tap into statistics, approaches, reports, etc. But also we need a key element that I definitely want to mention now is the one-stop shops. We need those centers at local level to provide, if it's not dedicated to tackling energy poverty, they need to have a department, they need to have a methodology to provide advice and support to people, basically. Also, on the question of indicators, I remember when I worked for a local authority, the best indicator is when people get their social benefits at the local bank. They have to queue. That's when you get those people, you engage with them. We need indicators and we need people on the ground to solve the issue. And those will be found in the one-stop shops. And also on the question of what did I want to say? Sorry. On the questions of one-stop shops, they need to be combining, providing technical advice and also combining the different solutions. So the energy efficiency obligation schemes we mentioned.
I'm sorry, also... we lost you. I don't know if you can hear us. You have to.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, no, it's okay, yeah.
Okay, so we need those one-stop shops to be there to combine the solutions for people. On the pool of solutions, as we have a pool of indicators, we need a broad scope of solutions to be combined at the local level. So to have those energy efficiency obligation schemes programs combined with other solutions, to have a holistic solution for people.
Yeah. No, that's clear.
Yes, on the same point, in fact, because when we use an energy efficiency scheme, in fact, energy saving generated are not sufficient to cover cost of household in energy poverty group. And that's why, exactly, we have to manage some indicators, and particularly upfleets, to try to cover with upfleets the cost of households. And obviously, the upfleet incentive you manage are very dedicated to your policy and the indicators who you want to target with which solution you want to promote. So it's you have to define and pilot it before. It's very interesting because when we look, in fact, the question of the upfleet is a question of the price, in fact. And to cover the cost, and you can decide to manage, to try to manage this question of the cost with different fleets, and to try to have, for instance, the 1 euro offer that I explained, or to integrate this price management to the market scheme and say, okay, we have something more simple, we have less upfleet, so the action that we measure are more close to the energy saving reported in the Article 7. But at the same time, you have to try to manage a market price, to have a good price, to be sure that the cost will be covered by this price. And it's very difficult because the time to market of price management is not the same than non-fleet incentive, which can be changed very quickly and which can be adapted really to the different indicators you want to manage in your energy poverty policy. So that's why the question of the unfleet is very complicated, because if I get the example that I said during the full period of export certificate, only 30, around, I don't have the exact figures, but only 1/3 of the white certificate generated in energy poverty were reported to the Article 7, 50% of regarding insulation, for instance. So what do you want to measure, and what is the main goal? Is to reach the people with no cost for households, or is it to have something with a measure of energy savings for these people? There is, I don't think where is a good solution. I don't know.
No. Okay, I think that's also in a good spirit. And one actually comment that I would like to make also to DGNR and to other colleagues is that if I think the Article 8, the way that it's framed now for, and I think that's something we've all concluded, that the way that it's framed out, that the sub-target on the energy poverty is something important, and we didn't have it before, and now for sure it's on the right step. What has to be made clear to the member states is that delays should not be made. If we see, I mean, all the studies from that circulate around with the introduction of the various price mechanisms like ETS2 or the MEPs or whatever other, they all speak about front loading of investments to the energy groups. The more we delay, the more expensive things will become, and the lower income groups, they need to pay also higher bills, and less income, they will have less disposable income to carry out investments for shifting to the heating fuels and all that, and the heating means. So I would here actually like to urge that when we have these new targets clear, on the deal, it should be clear also mandate to the member states that don't delay the process within 0.8% to allocate to low-income groups and energy poor groups, because time will be lost and then costs will be much higher for them, for these groups, but also for the entire society to pay the investments required. I would like to thank all the panel. I know it was a difficult one with the technical issues, but I know that online everything was recorded normally, and people would like to hear everything. Thank you for the questions also. And we move on to the next part.
Indeed, we move on to the next panel. I've seen a lot of questions in the chat, and what we will try to do is in the briefing after the event, answer also some of the questions that we didn't have time to answer. I wrote in the chat, so you didn't see, but we also are working on a project called ENPOR together with the Austrian Energy Agency, focusing on energy poverty for the rental sector. And there, the Austrian Energy Agency explained two things to reach out to energy poor households, which I found very good, is that they involve women from the communities to go on the advisory missions with them, so because they are trusted by the communities, and they also because of course it's based on the country specificities, but they developed a material to present them how to save energy at home in, I think, 8 different languages, not only in Austrian or English. There is Turkish, I don't remember all of them, but yeah. So this can be also an example, and yeah, I invite you to visit the ENPOR website, ENPOR. So next panel, Christos, I invite you. Christos is from Crete in Greece and will focus on national examples.
Thank you, Marie. Hello everyone. I'm very happy that we will discuss the very challenges issue of additionality. I think it's the more complicated, according to my experience as part of the administrator of the EEO scheme in Greece. And we want today to discuss experience from 5 different countries and to see what is required, because obviously we have to focus more on the technical issues which are dealing with the additionality issue. I have prepared a slide, I don't know, no, yes, describing the 3 pillars as mentioned in Annex 5 of the EED. This is for one of these, the first one, let's say it's the theoretical concepts, because the member states should count only the savings additional to those that would have been occurred in any event without the implementation of the examined policy, determining the main parameters which have been included in this calculation. The second one, the member state shall not include the savings resulting from the implementation of mandatory union law. And the third one, to count savings exceeding the 2 regulations about the passenger vehicles and light duty vehicles, and one, the eco design. So now, having in mind these 3 pillars, I would like to invite Mrs. Vesna Bukarica from the Energy Institute of Požar to present their side from the activities that have been occurred in Croatia in order to comply with the requirements of the ED for additionality. Vesna, you have 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, only 5 minutes.
I can do it quick. Yeah, thank you very much. I would start with the fact that Article 7, or soon to be Article 8, is really challenging, and not only additionality part, which is a cherry on top of the challenge. But anyhow, let me just briefly share the experience on the matter from Croatia. So, as you may know, in Croatia we decided to fulfill Article 7 with combination of alternative measures and obligation scheme. And when it comes to this definition, our policymaker or legislator took this first one, that savings are additional if they are not if they occurred with the help of the policy or with the engagement of obligated party or implementing authority. And this is actually transposed in energy efficiency law in Croatia, which really states that energy savings needs to be additional to something which is set according to technical standards, but not specified which technical standards. So having that in mind, policymakers, when designing policy measures, alternative policy measures, firstly, we decided as a country that our alternative measures are actually subsidy programs. So without money support, they would not happen, which is of course questionable. Of course, there are always free riders. So the next step, because we don't know how to evaluate free riders really, despite all academic work on that matter, then in all our alternative measures, which are dominantly energy renovation program for buildings, we put requirements, technical requirements of building envelope parts or technical equipment, which are indeed higher or stricter than it's given in our technical regulation on rational use of energy in buildings. So meaning, okay, maybe you don't really need the grant, but then if you get that grant, then at least do something which is not the minimum required, and we take it as it is. That's additionality in alternative measures. When we go to energy efficiency obligation scheme, and also I have to tell that I have to say that energy efficiency obligation scheme in Croatia is quite young. We are now in 4th year, and previous 2 and something years were really really strange. So we are running the new scheme under strange circumstances, in which circumstances the obligated parties are really not that much informed about the scheme, about their obligations, and about additionality as well. What I mean is that when it comes to energy efficiency obligation scheme, one of the problems that we are facing is that suppliers want to claim every savings from their business as usual activities, which are also legal obligations. For instance, informing their customers about their energy consumption with some small energy advice. That's a legal obligation. That's even written under chapter information and metering in EED, and it's also transposed in Croatian legislation. But they want to claim savings from that. Rollout of smart meters and so on and so on. There are some examples that are really something that usually our ministry deals with when it comes to energy efficiency obligation. Then again, when it comes to additionality, we do have methods that are so let's say made through different projects like multi-E project, which are robust and which are proved to be to taking into account additionality, but then we get so many questions why, and that doesn't make sense. For instance, one obligated party is changing their car fleet, and that car fleet is old, and now they know that they will save 100 of something, but due to additionality requirement, you will only accept 20 of something. So it's a constant issue of convincing someone that is the methodology, and that is as we like in Croatia say, oh, we cannot do anything. The European Commission said so. That's our favorite answer. So on the this is a little bit of experiences. So about the question, what is needed to what kind of support is needed for additionality in Croatia, and I'm sure in some other member states as well. Is clarity of what can be done, what is allowed to be claimed as savings, and even more, I would say, what cannot be claimed as the savings. We produced many good reports in this project. There are many other projects. I would just like to mention StreamSave, which is also a great project providing new robust methodologies for calculation of energy savings. What I would like to see as a deliverable of one project is examples of what should not be done. Yeah, as a worst case examples. Yeah, so 5 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and for your proposal for for additional support. I'm also a member in the StreamSave, so somehow we have to streamline, which is the aim of the StreamSave, all this effort. Thank you very much, and I will stress the attention also on how to quantify free riders effect. So something must be done toward this in order all the member states have a uniform approach about the quantification of this. Thank you, Vesna. Then I would like to invite Dario Di Santo from FIRE to present the Italian experience. They are, obviously from the water certificate experience. Thank you, Dario.
Good work. Okay, me again, but without jacket, so it's a different person. Yes, maybe this one works better, I don't know. In Italy, we have many alternative measures besides our energy efficiency obligation, which is a white certificate scheme. And in many of these measures, we use point 1 to identify the additionality, and we use simplified schemes to evaluate the savings. But in this case, I prefer to speak about white certificates. So white certificates are metered savings, and we, when we say that, we don't mean with smart meters, but we mean something like IPMVP option B. So you need to measure savings at project level with dedicated meters, both for ex ante and ex post consumption, and also not only the energy consumption, all the different factors that affect the energy consumption, like climate, occupancy, the use of production, manufacturing line, etc. So, as you can imagine, this is a little bit more complicated than the demand saving approach of other simplified approaches, especially when you deal with small projects, both because there can be an important cost for meters, and because, and it's the main issue, you need time to measure the ex ante consumption, so the baseline for the energy saving calculation. And this is one of the main issues we have, because the white certificate scheme is aimed mainly at the industrial sector, and you are asking industrial company, okay, let's wait, for example, 1 year or a little bit less to evaluate the baseline, and then you can implement the project, also because the scheme requires that the proposal is presented before the project has started, that is also for materiality issues. Nevertheless, this MMV strict approach has worked over the years. And of course, the benefit is that you get real savings, and you get a lot of information which are useful for the ministry and the agency involved in the managing of the scheme, because you get a lot of insights on what is happening within the industrial sector in terms of transformation, of implementation, energy efficiency actions, both for cross-sectoral interventions and most noticeably for process changes. And that's interesting. By the way, we have been using this approach since the beginning, and nowadays it is mandatory for all projects starting from 2017. We have no more limit savings or simplified approaches in place. And this approach that is used for substitution, so I mean there is a technology in place and we substitute it with a more efficient one or something similar, is also linked with simplified additionalities nowadays, because in case of substitution, the additionality is evaluated ex ante by the ministry, and only only technologies and interventions that are considered additional with respect to all these points are eligible for the white certificate scheme. And the dedicated tables that decide what is eligible and what is not are updated every 1, 2, 3 years, depending on the different type of intervention. Besides, we have different duration for which the white certificate are recognized, from 3 to 10, which allows us to fine-tuning and taking into account both the complexity of the measures and cost, and also additionality and materiality in a better way. With new installation, meaning there is no technology in place, we install a new one or a new process, we use the original approach. The difference is that in this case, the baseline is no more the ex ante consumption, but it becomes a reference baseline, which is based either on the mandatory law and the minimum requirements, or more often to what currently the supply is providing to the users. So is the average efficiency of a certain technology nowadays is, let's say, 92%, you have to go beyond this 92%. And of course, you build your baseline according with this 92% value. By the way, this means that either we are in line with 0.1 or we are beyond 0.1, because if this current average has been already modified, thanks, for example, to the push of our support measures, we are already beyond the business as usual scenario, which on which theoretically the additionality shall be evaluated. So the main benefit for this approach is the precision, both for MMB and for additionality. On the other hand, we have some issue in dealing with smaller projects and or small and medium enterprises, because in small and medium enterprise monitoring system are less used nowadays, and without that, it means that you usually have to install meters when you think about your project. So with the, for example, baseline, and this, as I said before, it's an issue. From the perspective of evaluators, so the managing agency, of course, on one hand, you have the advantage that you don't need to make a lot of calculation example because it's a proponent that has to do that. On the other hand, you need evaluators who are able to deal with a bigger MMB approach, and there needs know-how and also time to evaluate this kind of projects. So I think this is. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it possible to develop and apply a standardized approach for monitoring and validating the savings from your experience so as to be used from all member states? Or we are far away from this?
What do you mean in terms of meter savings or in general?
I don't know. For me, it's cost-effective solution system. So what can be probably standardized in order to be replicable from other member states?
I think it is possible. I think our strict MMB provide certificate is good, but it's mainly for medium and large projects. Otherwise, you need simplification. And so I think that something that can be even said, but can be something in between. For example, for tax credit schemes, which presently are the one delivering more savings under Article 7/8, 9, 10. We don't use the savings, but we use estimates of the savings calculated by the technician that present the proposal on behalf of the user. This is something which is more precise of demand savings, but still remains simplified. I think the best thing in this case is to put together this simplified approach with some measurement. That can be done, especially for buildings, because in buildings, if you go through a deep renovation, usually something you can measure with your smart meters. You don't need specific meters. And I think it's good to do this kind of evaluation afterwards, even if not to assign the incentive to check what has been done, and also to provide feedback to companies, because deep renovation is not so sure that you get the savings that you expect for many different reasons. And you can also orientate the companies to implement better interventions in buildings.
Thank you. Then I want to invite Mrs. Svetomira Kuleshka from the Sustainable Energy Development Agency to present the insights from Bulgaria.
Hi, everyone. My 5 minutes all of a sudden became very easy. You all heard of ESMA. It's exactly the same in Bulgaria. So long story short, first of all, in Bulgaria, we also adopted the mixed approach. We have alternative measures and we have EEOs. When it is about the alternative measures, the things are much easier. They are also subsidy programs, so they fit into first pillar, first point, let's say. Also, similar to Italy, when it's about the program, the policy, it's ex ante, the technologies eligible technologies are well calculated to be additional, let's say. The problems come when it's about the EEOs. And the obligated parties, well, there are several, let's say, issues there. Most important ones, let's say, I'll point out. First of all, it's too, let's say, complex for them to understand and to follow, although all these requirements for additionality are set by in the law. It's the other thing is when it comes to following those requirements, obligated parties decide that it's too complex for them, and also it leads to rejection of the idea for implementing measures. The overall result is that we are losing savings, because when some project is ready to be financed, let's say, and people are looking for investor, and when they go to the obligated parties, if their savings are not enough above the above the minimum requirements, the obligated parties just step back. And as a result, the state, Bulgaria, loses all these savings from the beginning, for Article 3, if you want. So these are the issues that we see coming to the additionality concerning the EEOs. Like I said, when it's about the alternatives in the subsidy programs, well, things are a bit easier and not that of an issue for us.
Thank you. Any potential solution to this?
I would love to hear them.
So we found the first issue that must be explored the next one. Then I would like to invite Gregor Dinius from Austrian agency. And of course, it's obvious that we have different level of maturity among the member states, because there is some countries with a white certificate scheme, more mature monitoring system. So somehow we have facilitate, yes, the improvement of all countries. Please, Gregor.
Okay, so I'm not sure to which countries you count Austria, whether it's the mature ones or not, because I think we are really learning. And I think my first statement, or maybe even the statement before the first statement, is maybe something that wasn't highlighted yet. Okay, now it's working again. Is I think one important function of additionality is actually, we don't want to waste resources, right? We don't want to waste funding money or resources for energy advice. So basically, that's what the policymakers want. They don't want to waste resources on things that would have happened anyway. And one very early experience for us, and I also have to make a confession, I'm an economist, so I'm not an engineer. And I think one very important first experience in Austria was this clash of cultures. Additionality is something that is completely irrelevant for most engineers and also for most businesses. They don't care about additionality. They care about the real savings that are realized. So communicating this concept that comes from economics, basically, and from policy making to the people who implement the projects. And Vesna and Sefi mentioned these problems actually implicitly, was quite a task. To tell them that it's still relevant, even though you have 100, you only get 10. How is that possible? It's happening, it's physics, the 100 are there, but you only accept 10 of them. I think this was really a challenge. But I think that the period 14 to 20 was really a learning phase for all of us, and we could very well build up on this. So in Austria, we also have a mix of alternative measures and EEOs, and as the persons before said, for subsidy schemes, additionality is relation to the EED, at least it's not a big issue, because all subsidy schemes are dealing with additionality anyway. Again, because they don't want to waste money on projects that are anyway implemented. But for the EEOs, so most of what I'm will be saying will relate to the EEOs. We have two kinds of methods basically in Austria, and we will have that also in the future. We have the deemed savings catalog, let's say, and the individual actions. So for the deemed savings, I think the main issue is just updating baselines regularly. And this is done by the authority, by the monitoring agency. But for individual calculations, mainly in industry and in companies, it's quite a challenge. So what we saw for the deemed savings methods in our new proposal for new methods was that, of course, savings decrease all the time. So we are always decreasing more and more the value of implemented measures. And the second thing is that some measures, we even stopped developing deemed savings methods because the savings are already so tiny. For example, household appliances. We don't have any methods on that anymore. Thinking about energy poverty, actually, I think there is a case where it's still additional, exactly in energy poor households. Household appliances would be a very additional savings, probably. As for the individual calculations, I think it's more or less pretty much in line with the requirements of the ED, what we are planning. But what I want to highlight is that in quite a lot of instances, we neither have a legal minimum requirement nor a market average, because there is just no market for these kind of products. If you have just one company, and we have that in a quite small country, if you have just one company in a sector, you don't have anything to compare with, you know. So there is a lot of arguing also with the companies of what is really additional, and you could argue forever, and you will come to no result with these companies. So I think in many industrial applications, it's more like, and I think this was also something that Dario said, if I understood correctly, is not about legal requirements or market average, but about what is the next, let's say, economically viable alternative. So comparing the one you implemented with the next economically viable alternative. Maybe some learning, some issues from the period 2014 to 20. I think really the construction of the counterfactual, which is the main task of additionality, is the challenge, especially with company and industrial measures. Because there we just don't have the data, we don't have the people. We would need an incredible amount of expertise, people, time to even determine what their processes are, how they are working, and what the best technical solutions are. So we more or less have to believe them what they do. There is also, in my feeling, there is quite a large bunch of measures, for example, in building and heating exchange, where actually additionality doesn't matter that much, because if you refurbish a building, you refurbish it and you just realize the savings, and the same goes for exchange of a heating system. Also, something that was mentioned by Sveti, and I would also like to highlight, is that we want to trigger measure in an energy efficiency obligation scheme. So if we come to a solution where we actually avoid the implementation of measures because the rules are so complicated, this will be different. So we have to be pragmatic. We have to accept with a certain certainty that we can accept these savings to being realized. And maybe one last remark that was also mentioned today already is that in the end, Article 7 is a means to an end. It's designed to realize savings in Article 3 and 4. And I think we also should have this into perspective.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any proposal for an operational solution? Because this is the real issue for the member state. I don't know, a model, a general model, some factors for each country. I don't know what can be done.
So I think I'm a little bit coming back to this issue of economists versus engineers. I studied economics for quite some time, and we always assume a perfect world. And we do not assume this because we really believe in the perfect world, because we just think it's a good starting point to understand things. but the real world doesn't obey the rules of the economic models. It's much more difficult. And I think we need a kind of an approximation to this ideal state. And the main message I would like to really communicate is pragmatism in additionality. Otherwise, we will not come to a solution. And another thing I would like to mention is that, because I think we also have this situation sometimes in Austria, but also maybe in other countries, we try to be stricter with the EEOs than with our own subsidy schemes, and this clearly doesn't work. So if you put the EEOs in a negative situation as compared to other schemes you have, be it taxation or subsidy schemes, it cannot work.
Thank you, Gregor. And last but not least, Armin Baum from Hungarian Energy Public Utility Regulatory Authority, present experience from Hungary.
Thank you. Maybe this one. Neither.
It's not on. It's not.
It works. Okay, thank you. So thank you. I'm Armin Böhm from the Hungarian Energy and Public Utility Regulatory Authority. Now I would like to give you a quick overview of the Hungarian MRV scheme and the additionality. So how we handle this problem. Oh, it's so small, sorry. We have identified three main issues. The first is the individual compliance assessment. So individual compliance assessment is needed in some specific cases. We are getting a lot of questions from the stakeholders, about really specific additionality related questions. To solve this question, we would like to standardize the whole MRV scheme. And this would be a solution for the two remaining issues. It is duplication and complex methodologies. But how? We have well-defined auditor certificate requirements with integrated auditor exams. We are operating frequently asked question page in our specific energy efficiency website. And we have technical manuals for the auditors as well. We are participating in an operational program financed by the EU together with the ministry to upgrade the MRV scheme and to upgrade the automation of the scheme itself. Okay, how we do this? On the first level, we see the implemented EE, the energy efficiency project, within the framework of the 30 Hungarian alternative measures and the EEOs. On the second level, we see the monitoring phase. So auditors and monitoring questionnaires. Okay, I will explain it in a minute. At the third level, we see the implementing bodies, A, B, and C, and the regulatory authority who collects the saving data, performs verification, and makes adjustments. Then comes the ministry, who prepares the report according to the government's regulation. So let's come back to the second floor. It's the monitoring phase. Within the framework of EEOs and some alternative measures like corporate tax relief, for example, the auditor should prove the additionality. So the auditor should guarantee that the criteria of additionality are fulfilled. In some alternative measures, the beneficiary should prove this via a monitoring questionnaire. In this case, in these measures, the entity proves the additionality by creating the rules accordingly. So if someone gets support from the alternative measures, it is guaranteed that the criteria of additionality are guaranteed. Okay, so our purpose, our goal is to standardize this whole process to give the sufficient IT background for this MRV scheme and to connect the databases which is used by the different implementing entities so that we can prove more easily the fact of additionality. Not an easy task, but no pain, no gain. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Armin. So I suppose that this is the answer on how to reduce the administrative burden because you have a holistic mechanism. So is this the solution, IT or other standardization? I don't know, activities. Do you have an idea? Is the administrative burden too high?
Maybe, sorry, thank you. Maybe the most important thing is a common approach is needed regarding the training of the auditors. So they should use properly the new IT platforms. They should be aware of the new rules regarding the additionality rules. And this is the process, this is the fact that we want to create via this operational project financed by the EU. So yes, the common approach for the auditor is the answer. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions. One can be if the current energy crisis will reduce the additional savings, or this will be counterbalanced by the reduced also income due to the high inflation. Do you have any indication about this? Indication.
Not as an indication, but what's currently happening in Croatia. I mean, the burden of anti-crisis measures is put on energy companies. So I think it's a really good question. What will happen with not only energy efficiency investments within the EEO, but energy investments in general? Because, you know, we are in Croatia as households, we are not suffering from increased price because it's not the burden will be taken over by energy companies. So I don't know, but it's something which needs to be considered.
Any other panelists, Dario?
Only once before because there's only one today. Again, I will say something.
Hello.
Yeah, of course.
I think, as Lesna said, it depends a lot whether the prices rise, but I think in companies, what comes first to my mind is that it's only, I mean, it's difficult to say that, but it's good that the prices are so high at the moment, but even more measures can be implemented. And I think this is exactly one of the examples where we come to our limits. We will not be able to analyze whether the changing energy prices will change the additional savings eligible in EED, because it's just too complex, and we will have a very academic discussion about savings versus not savings, but we see that these savings and these projects are realized, and this is the most important issue. So I'm not sure we will really get a good answer to this question.
Thank you.
Well, I think, but in this case, coming back to one question I have in my panel, we need simplicity. Because it's very complex to understand how additionality will work with all these changes. And if we waste time trying to understand that, there is the risk that companies and families don't get the support they need. Because in Italy, everyone is suffering from the high prices. The families, the companies, and also the companies that sell energy, because in a lot of cases, they are not getting the money for the sold energy. So in practice, you have the need to accelerate energy efficiency, and this is not simple because presently a lot of companies and families want to do something and they don't have the technology. Okay, I can install solar photovoltaics, but you wait 1.5 years. Okay, or you can a new air compressor. Okay, let's wait 10 months. So the problem is you need time. In the meantime, companies are eroding their budgets to buy energy. So the risk is that in the end, energy efficiency will be quite effective and interesting from an economic point of view, but you don't have money to buy for it. And this is the real issue we have presently. So I think we need something simple to understand how to help companies and families to go over this difficult moment. Not for everybody, it's a difficult moment, but for many companies and families it is.
Yes.
So just to get it also clear, because I think that's a nice message what you want to convey also back to the commission is that, so from the point we have all these price fluctuations on the final consumers, at least for the countries that do have that, when we count savings from the measures, we should not go and isolate the savings from the prices per se, because some people might have the money to invest because the price is high, so they change. Now, if they make use of a subsidy measure, for example, at the same time, this saving normally should be taken out. So you would say that we should isolate the savings from price-induced measures versus policy-induced measures, or should we leave it very simple and forget about the prices at this stage because prices are insane, and we should just focus on what savings are generated by measures? The second one.
The second one also because prices can change very fast, and so we don't know what will happen.
Any other question from the participants? Okay, so thank you very much for your fruitful contribution. I think that we have a lot of work to do with the additionality. This is the message. Okay, thank you very much. So,
okay, so thank you all for joining. I hope you found it.
So thank you all for joining. I hope you found it an interesting one. It's quite dense. I know it's a lot of information. This Article 7, Article 8, things that we're discussing over 3 years. We try to put some key buzzes, for key buzzwords here to discuss and put it on the table. I think there is also a lot of messages back to the Commission for that, from such discussions and the things that do work or don't work and what risks there are. With ENSMOV, I hope we have managed to, and with the remaining time we have, we'll try to resolve as many issues as still possible. Also coming back, we forgot to mention to thank also for the concerted action, the people from the concerted action that we have collaborated a lot and we have exchanged views. I hope that also with the new project that will come up, we'll